Let me first introduce our beautiful and handsome panelists for today. So they will be having a panel discussion entitled The Effects of the COVID-19 Pandemic on Legal Education, Stories from the Field. So this will be moderated by Attorney Tanya Lat. So first, our first panelist is Ms. Samantha Morales, a student from the University of the Philippines. Yes, catwalk, catwalk, pak, pak, pak. Okay. Next, we have Professor Prima Jesusa B. Quinsayas, a faculty member from the Mindanao State University. Oh, the call of nature called. So her moment is interrupted. But yes, so the other girl is Professor Quinsayas. So, kunwari, nandito lang siya, pak, pak, pak. Okay, upo. Okay, and lastly, we have Dean Ferdinand Negre from the Manuel Quezon University, the Dean. Yes, nakapasa ako ng civil law dahil sa kanya. Hi, hello. So, this is Professor Quinsayas. You can go, yes, here. Dean. Yes. And then may we now call on our moderator, Attorney Tanya Lat, to sit beside Ms. Morales. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So we've heard the empirical data from the research team, and it would be nice for us to hear the substantive aspect of it, the human aspect. And so we're very delighted to have with us Sam, who is one of our student fellows, okay, and then Dean Ferdy, who is my colleague at the Ateneo de Manila and is a newly installed dean just last year at MLQ. Okay. And then Prof. Prima Quinsayas, who is one of our outstanding LECP participants from MSU. So we thought of gathering this panel, so they represent the three different sectors of the legal education sector, and we'd like to gather your insights about what was happening. So the title of this panel is Stories from the Field. We take that from Theory U, for those of you who are into systems thinking. And part of understanding any system or any problem, you need to get a view from as many parts in the system as possible. And so that's why it's so important to not just hear the views of the deans, which is the common, but also to hear the views from the professors and definitely from the students who are our main stakeholders. So for the first question, I guess, for each one of you, if you could briefly talk about what was the pandemic like for you, especially the first year. As we recall, the lockdown started March 2020. I think practically all the schools had to shut down for at least a month. In order to transition, we had to figure out what to do. And we started, I think, again in June or July, and we had to figure out how to proceed there. And this is a continuing thing. It's a continuing thing. So there was a first phase of the pandemic, and then the second phase where we started to get our footing. And Dean Ferdy, this is where you can speak to, na parang as a new dean managing the transition. No? Parang, how was it? So if we could do first Sam, and then Prof. Prima, and then Dean Ferdy. How was it for you coping with the pandemic?
Good morning, everyone. Of course, as mentioned, I'm Samantha Valerie Morales from the University of the Philippines College of Law. So, of course, as we all have experienced during the pandemic, when COVID hit in 2020, I actually had to come home to my hometown in Carandal, South Cotabato in Mindanao also. And so, during that time, we didn't know what was gonna happen, and everyone was still getting their bearings. Zoom wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And of course, for my online education, it was riddled with slow and faulty internet connections. In our place, it was the electricity sometimes is intermittent and unstable. So we had to deal with that also. And of course, the experience was very taxing mentally because we had to worry about the contracting of the virus and the immobility of quarantines and lockdowns. And we, of course, also had to go through online legal education alone without any of your peers. So that was very very taxing on your mental health because there was no social aspect at all. So that was probably a summary of my experience during the pandemic.
Thank you, Sam. Prof. Prima, how about you?
Good morning, everyone. Mayong buntag sa atong tanan.
Mayong buntag.
I actually teach at two schools. I'm with the Mindanao State University Jensen campus and the Notre Dame Marble University College of Law. My dean is here. Sa takot ko lang kung hindi ko banggitin. Baka sa susunod na semestre, wala na po akong load. Ayan. I remember it was second semester of academic year 2019-2020, no? And when the lockdown was announced, my first thought was, what happens next? I mean, with Notre Dame, we were close to having the final exams, and pretty much we were already given instructions that, yeah, it will be online, and there were already some set of procedure. But with my other school, it was a wait-and-see thing. We did not know what to do. We had about 2 or 3 weeks more classes before it was final exams. And it took 2 weeks before we received our first instruction, which was, please coordinate with the class beadle. So for those who have been class beadles as law students, my sympathies. No, all of a sudden, it's the class beadle's responsibility who had to sort out what do we do. And I know this sounds so third world, but we resorted to email, and I had to trust that my students were actually going to take the exam without resorting to, what we say, cheating, no? But I tried to make the exam in such a way that even if you open your textbook and you open all the Google site, lawfield, Supreme Court, gov.ph, you are so not finding the answer. And that's that sort of thing. But eventually, again, Vistan was saying age of acceleration, no? Unfortunately, and I'll be very honest, one was responding like an aged person, while the other was responding with acceleration. So while my one school was still figuring out what to do, the other school suddenly dove into the LMS, the Schoology. And I remember just being overwhelmed with the LMS because I don't even know how to work on a Facebook account. And then suddenly here I am being told na this is your page, this is how you handle your students, this is your portfolio. And it's what? And NDMU held several trainings for us, and I found myself having to retool. And fast forward, wow, natuto akong mag-Kahoot. I learned Jamboard, I learned Mentimeter, I learned Zoom, the whiteboard, name it. I probably tried my hand, and I apologize to my students for making them my guinea pigs, no? So basically, that's the experience I had the past 2 years, Ma'am Tanya.
Thank you, Prof. Prima. So Dean Ferdy, so at the time the pandemic hit, you hadn't become dean yet. So siguro we can focus on that aspect that you were professor and having to transition. I will ask you about the deanship aspect later. But how was it for you as a professor at Ateneo, having to transition to this purely online setup?
Thank you, Ma'am Tanya. In the grand tradition of a classroom, can I ask a question first? Resit. What do you call a law dean appointed on September 1, 2021 at the height of the pandemic during a hard lockdown? Anyone? 5. For 5 points. Speak out, please. A headless chicken. That was me. Practically, I'm going ahead of that question.
Okay, it's okay. Answer it how you feel.
I was a headless chicken. No access to, documents to the school because it was, hard lockdown at that time, September 1. So I was lost. Going back to the question, I pretty much adjusted faster because in Ateneo, there was this training, so to speak, and I participated. So, but it was my first time to hear about Zoom. What is Zoom? And probably a good number of us here, heard that term Zoom for the first time. So, and how does it work? So you really have to look into technology. My children helped me a lot. That's the key, And I love, tweaking on technology, and the kids, they know, they learn very quickly, and you can always ask them. Perhaps one thing I learned early on was the use of asynchronous and synchronous. And thank you to LEB, sir, to your LEB MC 56, right? Because, it was difficult adjusting, talking to your screen, and then students dropping off, offline. So it was a challenge. Thank you.
Okay, so I think all of you mentioned Zoom, no? The experience, the challenge of having an online classroom. Could you provide more details of what the Zoom classroom experience was like from your respective vantage points?
So for my vantage point, of course, in Zoom we could just turn off the camera and everything. But for me personally, I tried to really turn on my camera just so to help my professors. I think, visualize their students. But of course, it was still hard because every after Zoom meeting, I would have Zoom fatigue, as mentioned earlier, and I would just lie down because it was very taxing, as I've said, and it was very, compared to the physical education, it would be very, because we couldn't really, we couldn't really interact with our classmates, I guess, unlike when we're in the classroom. So it would be very tiring because we wouldn't have anyone to really empathize with us. Yeah, thank you.
So it was the isolation, the loneliness.
Yeah, the isolation, I think. And it would lead to a very tiring meeting for me, for the students, I guess.
I've heard that, no, yung parang you become zombies after a long ano. And I got that also from my students. So parang even just after an hour of class, you'd have to take a break or take a nap or something.
Yes.
Yeah. How about from the professor's side? I mean, what has it been like?
I'll go first.
To be honest, my first experience with Zoom was stressful because it was my workplace that introduced me to it, no? So DOJ, Special Projects Division, started mandating all training for prosecutors to push through, and it had to be done on Zoom. And I hated it so much that I tried to check out the other available options. I tried Big Blue Button, which NDMU was using. I even tried MS Teams, which Supreme Court is using. That's terrible, right? MS Teams, so sorry talaga po. And then I even attempted WebEx. But in the end, I went back to Zoom. And I just tried everything to the point that I said, bibili na nga ako ng isang account. So I bought an account because there are certain features that are not available to a free Zoom account. You only get to hold a meeting 45 minutes, right? So can you imagine? You'll say, okay, students, let's log back in after 45 minutes. It starts to sound like, what is this? A comedy? But I must say, I love the whiteboard feature of Zoom. I get to interact with my students. With use the, if you're familiar with it, you get to put up words and then you can make word puzzles and interconnect everything. I just love it. But my worry with Zoom is that it's available on chat, not chat, the chat box, where you can message each other. And sometimes I think, maybe one of my students is giving the answer to my question to another
Radyo.
Di ba yung ganyan? Alright? But all in all, I would say, Ma'am Tanya din, no, that Zoom eventually saved my online classes because it helped simulate interaction between and among students and the facilitator, I mean the teacher.
Thank you po. In my case, we're lucky in Ateneo that we have an IT support. So it's a combination of, I mentioned about pre-recorded lectures that I have, done even before the pandemic hit. So I have ready recorded lectures. So I'll just ask the IP support team to upload on Canvas the recorded lectures and then additional materials to update the lectures. And then we discuss on Zoom. So we have this support team from the school, and then I have my kids supporting me at home. And it worked. I also did a lot of Mentimeter and then sort of gamified the approach. Although I'm far from it, and I still have a lot of, techies to learn. But from the feedback I'm getting, I think it's working. It's working. It's not yet perfect. Far from, the experience of, staying in a classroom, because I love to go around the classroom, approach the students, which I cannot do on Zoom. So those are the challenges. Thank you.
So thank you for that. So with those challenges, what did you have to do differently? So parang looking at your life pre-pandemic, what did you have to change in your routine, in your coping strategies, or generally in terms of your lifestyle to cope with what was going on?
I think mostly for me, it was the decrease in physical activity that really changed from the online to from the physical to the online. Because, for example, of course, when it was in physical, we would wake up, get dressed, and get ready for school. But during the online pandemic, during online learning, we would just get up and open Zoom, and we wouldn't really have anything that would make us get ready for the online learning. And of course, we would sit there the whole day in front of the computer without any, of course, we wouldn't really see nature, we wouldn't really go out because we'd be so busy. Unlike when it was in pre-pandemic, that we could walk around the campus, we could, of course, talk to other peers that are not from our block. So I think the social and the physical aspect really is the main difference between that. But also, of course, your study routine would change because without those social and physical aspects, you would just be studying at home. There wouldn't really be a change in your scenery. There wouldn't be a change in your view. So that would really take a lot, I guess, from a student also. So yeah.
And that's what happened to you. It was a personal thing.
Ma'am.
Because you were isolated and you're just at home.
Yes.
It was really very different from before.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. How about you, Attorney Prima?
I don't know if this was intentional, but after I think 2 semesters into the pandemic, I noticed that I have not been using the Socratic method so much. It was just frustrating at the start of the pandemic when a student is on deck and I would use the pin or the spotlight of Zoom, no? So all the other students can see the student. And then suddenly he or she disappears from my screen. And then the beadle will say, "Ma'am, brown out daw sa Kidapawan." Diba? Something like that, right? That drove me nuts. And Region 12 is notorious for blackouts here and there. Tumatango-tango siya. Mabuang ka. But I started exploring the breakout room of Zoom and had more group-based activity, and then students would be brought back to the plenary. That's the first change I noticed. And the second one was that I had to lose my obsession over cover-to-cover course content. I used to be obsessed that I have to cover everything from the first page to the last page of my selected textbook. Ayun po, ma'am.
Thank you. Dean Ferdinand.
I'll probably have to do that breakout session on Zoom. But Ateneo now is back to face-to-face, so it's not much of a problem. Taking care of myself during the pandemic, I learned, and thank you, Ma'am Tanya, because I know you've been doing this to your students way back before the pandemic, meditation. So I learned to do meditation. I embraced meditation. I'm a morning person, so when I wake up, I do meditation, which I could not do before the pandemic. No, because you rush. Traffic on EDSA, traffic on so you have to run, And that's one thing good, I think, that came out of the pandemic is looking back. And the family bonding sort of imprisoned in the house. So there's that beauty of, looking at your children, your wife, and taking care of each other. And then my children again, Papa, you have to do this. You have to reach the floor, So they teach me how to do stretching. And I did. And I'm glad. So, but I'll have to do that breakout session on Zoom. Thank you.
So thank you. So parang we get a personal glimpse into your respective lives and then how they've changed. Okay, so Sam, it was on a personal level, and as a student, kasi you're on your social development. Your social development is so important to you. Professor Prima, parang you focused on the academic aspect. So parang how you changed in terms of your teaching method and what you had to do differently because the technology required something different. Okay. And then also Dean Ferdy, the family aspect, diba, you focused on how being locked down was actually a good thing for bonding. And you had your own tech team at home. Diba? Your kids were your tech support. Yeah. Allow me to ask a personal, a more directed question to Dean Ferdy, okay, because si Dean Ferdy has that perspective of being in transition and having to, so whereas before, diba, you were part of the faculty and, parang Ateneo was taking care of everything, then you had to step into the role of now leading a new faculty in a different law school under hard lockdown. Yeah, could you tell us what challenges did you face?
So I mentioned I had less chicken. So I joined this group. The first problem I had was the buy-in. Even without the pandemic, a new face. There's that resistance, especially coming from another school. So I had that problem. 2-3 weeks into my deanship, I don't know what that is, I asked for a faculty meeting on Zoom. So, a good number joined, probably 20 out of 60 faculty. And immediately, I noticed all quiet. And I was looking at the photos. I see some photos without a face. So the focus, the lighting. So immediately, we have a problem. How can you communicate to someone who's not there? Not even there.
Wait, are you saying that the video was on, but obviously the person was not in front of the screen? Ah, okay.
Even, the focus, not in front of the camera,
okay.
Those stuff. So I panicked. I need to have the buy-in of my faculty. And so I was calling Attorney Aaron. I called Attorney Aaron, I need help. I called you, Ma'am Tanya. I was like trying to reach out to your cousin or David, because I was looking at his, posts, and he was into this, technology, how to deliver your message online. And then LECP came about, and I was like, thank you very much. So I immediately sent messages to my faculty, please, let's, participate. I'll be the first one. And I did. But lo and behold, 2, probably 3 joined the LECP. That was batch 2, because batch 1 was for, I understand, the schools
we
in the
prioritized
south.
Mindanao,
Yes.
yeah.
So I told Ma'am Tanya, please, can we join? Oh, just wait, there's batch 2. Kaya lang, that's the problem, the buy-in from the faculty and the mindset, I need to have that open mind from my faculty. So that's the challenge. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing until today, the buy-in of the faculty. Second, student engagement. I haven't met them. I haven't met some of my faculty until today because of the pandemic. We did have some face-to-face meetings. Others were not able to join. Everyone's working. So those are the challenges that I've been facing. Students, so we tried the class advisorship to reach out to the students. It's working, but I think it's a work in progress. So we still have a lot of things to do. I need your help. Community support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Ferdy. I'll just interject a little bit kasi the thing about buy-in and then yung nakwento nga ni Doc Chris earlier about faculty dropping out. I experienced that in my own family because my father teaches at Angeles University. And when they had to go online, he said, so I asked him, Daddy, are you going to take a teaching load? And he said, no, I'll sit this one out. Because he thought Zoom was too difficult. And I can imagine that many of your faculty also had that same thing na, it's okay, Dean, don't give me a load na lang. Diba? So there's that. So my follow-up question to that is, from your own experience, so as students and as professors and deans, what has been your observation with regard to adaptability to technology? Kumbaga, is there a particular profile of student or professors? In your case, in terms of your professors, parang ano yung profile ng professor who is adaptable to technology and the one who is not adaptable? From your own experience lang.
So for my experience, of course, the younger professors, they're of course better adaptable to the technology. But I actually commend my older professors because I had professors who were, 70 or 80 years old, but they knew how to use Zoom. They weren't very confused about how stuff works. So I think that's a very commendable thing that they really adapted to the technology just so they could be able to teach the students again. But of course, there were still, I still had professors who didn't know how to, some of them didn't know how to leave the Zoom or they didn't know how to share their screen. But of course, us as students, we would still help the professors because we, of course, understand the situation that we are in, the generation gap. So it's, I think both parties helped each other to get through whatever the situation was during the online learning.
Would you like to share those particular names para ma-recognize lang natin? Yung parang, because yung parang, I just have to say, because I've seen people younger than me who didn't want to learn these new technologies. And then you have people like, I'll give one name, Professor Ruben Balane, bless him. Before he passed away, he was here at the College of Law, di ba ma'am, di ba? He was here learning how to Zoom. At the time he passed away, I think he had 3 gadgets. He had a laptop, a desktop, and even had an iPad or something. Yung mga ganon. So, who would you like to commend na?
the professor that was in my mind was Professor Ildefonso Jimenez, Sir Jim Jimenez, because I think I didn't know his age, but I don't know his age, but he looked he looked old, but
Older than Dean then.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
so dual citizen no, ma'am. Dual citizen. Okay, so dual citizen siya. Okay.
Yes. But yeah, Sir Jim didn't really have a lot of struggle with Zoom. Like, we didn't really have to help him as much. And because during the end of my second semester, during the end of that semester, I had dengue. So I had to take my final exams on a different schedule. And Sir Jim, he messaged me on Viber about my upcoming finals. He called me to check on my situation during that time. So I guess like it was I really admired how he adjusted to the technology. He used Viber, he was using Zoom. He didn't really have to ask us for help as much as other professors.
That's very nice. And Dean Jim, Prof. Jim was my teacher in in Prim many years ago.
Prim too.
Yeah. So thank you. Well, I will message him. He actually messaged her. I will tell him. So thank you. Yeah, si Prof. Prima.
I think I learned more from my students, as much as I hope my students learned from me. But when it came to technology, and I noticed my students were not equal in terms of their familiarity, let's say, with Zoom or other third-party app, no? So what I would do if I'd be given a new class, in particular, that I've not handled in the past, I would spend one whole meeting, the first meeting, just as experimenting on technology. So, for instance, I'd say, okay, let's try Mentimeter. And we'd have a fun topic, like, what is the best movie line that you like? So they post it on, they post it on Jamboard, and then we'd try Mentimeter. Because it's anonymous, right? Their answers would just pop up. So I would ask questions like, who is your next presidential candidate? So it comes out, without identifying the students. And we tried Kahoot, but because we've taken up LECP about safe and brave learning environment, I told my students, don't use your real name, use pseudonyms, so that if you get the wrong answer, it's not so embarrassing, right? That you're the only one who got that wrong answer. But Schoology, Ma'am Tanya, Dean, I learned how to navigate Schoology because my students guided me. Ma'am, on your left, you can see this. Click. You will see a drop-down menu. Click. So, it was a love and love relationship between my students and me. And that's how we navigated technology together.
That's so nice. Yeah, Dean Ferdy.
Thank you. As a general observation, I think the students, being the younger ones, and the younger faculty are more, adaptable to technology. But I would like to mention one professor, Justice Hofilenia. Yes. He's probably 88 now. Still teaches. How did he do it, or how does he do it? He goes to school and someone will assist him. He was able to deliver his lessons. So perhaps one example that, age should not be a problem.
So that's really heartwarming. I've seen Justice Hofilenia in action also. So he was still very active during the pandemic, Zoom meetings. Parang he's dean of the Master of Law program of PLM, and he was, still actively an administrator, and tech was definitely not a problem. So what it comes out na parang it's more of a mindset. It's really a mindset and an attitude. It's not so much the age that determines how adaptable people are to the technology. Okay. Now, so my next question for all of you is, what are the good aspects of the technology that you would like to continue now that we transition back to blended learning or in person? And what are the things about the technology that you don't like so much and perhaps we could innovate?
I think for me, of course, the mobility of online learning. You can go to class in a cafe where it would probably, depending on the student, it would probably help them more to be around other people also during online class. Or I think, for example, like if the professor couldn't come to school, they could just conduct an online class because because of course of the mobility of online class. So I think that's the number one benefit for me of the online learning. But I guess the internet connection is the most is the negative part of this, because not everyone has constant and stable connection, of course. And in the campuses, I think the connection would have to be improved, and the professors would. One good thing that I saw during the pandemic was the teachers were more compassionate, I think, because they understood what everyone was experiencing. So I guess that's the negative part, the things that you couldn't really control, the internet, the electricity, of course, and all that other aspects.
Thank you.
I would say being able to hold online classes anytime, anywhere would be one aspect I'd like to keep. Both for MSU and NDMU, we have students who are police officers, soldiers, doctors, nurses. So when they are sent out on the field, I noticed that some of them still connect into class. And they are somewhere, I can see the forest behind them. Yan. And I realized, wow, that's one advantage, and I'd like to keep that. In fact, I kept going back to the module on high flex, and I was wondering whether that's possible, that I'm actually in class with some of my students, but some of them are joining us online, and then maybe record the whole thing, and then later, those who were not able to be in person and joining us online synchronously may then access the record of the class. No, what I do not like is the lack of spontaneity. I mean, we can be spontaneous like this, no? Nagpatawa si sir na hindi daw siya magaling sa internet. Hindi nga. Right? But in online classes, everyone is on mute, so you don't hear that aha experience from students, right, Sam? Yung tawag-tawa na kayo, pero yung teacher mo hindi alam, right? I'd like that to be done away with. So, I think especially NDMU, already blended learning. We're doing a mix of synchronous, asynchronous, and in-person and on.
Thank you. Dean Ferdy.
Thank you. I'm probably one of the few who would say, please keep online learning. In MLQU, we have 80% of the students are working. We have students in Mindanao, around 20 plus all over the Philippines. We have students who are based abroad. So speaking of OFWs, they're given this opportunity to finish law school. So if at all possible, please keep that as an option. Challenges, we've heard earlier about academic integrity.
Yes.
Yes, there's that problem. But again, these are adult learners. It should be their responsibility, Even in classroom, actually, you cannot avoid cheating if the student would cheat. There's always a way to cheat, but that's their problem, to my mind. Let them. And those who are really into learning, then they should be given this opportunity to learn. We still do face-to-face when it comes to midterm exams, final exams, but there's always that option for those who are cannot be physically present to do it online. So I hope that this online learning be sustained and improved, especially on that issues of connectivity, on the issues of integrity. I think there's a solution. I'd like to think that all the stakeholders are helping out. So we have the Supreme Court, the bar reforms, trying to, focus on subjects that are important, and uh, shortening the bar exams so that we don't have to be that bar-centric, you know. It's working. I think the stars are aligning. I'd like to to think. And probably in a few years, we will have this system improved. Thank you.
Thank you. I like what you said that the stars are aligning. I think they certainly are. They certainly are. It just had to take the COVID pandemic to bring everyone siguro in the same, di ba, rowing in the same direction, kumbaga. Yun. We'll beg your indulgence. Medyo mainit pa yung discussion, but I know it's lunchtime, but we hope you don't mind extending a little bit. We now open the floor to questions. Maybe there's some of you who would like to pose questions to our panel and also to our resource persons from the research team. So it's going to be one open forum for that. Ayan, sige po, Com Lawrence. May tanong po, graded recitation po ba ito?
What do you think is what do you have in face-to-face teaching that you don't have in online teaching? Or what is the advantage of face-to-face teaching compared to online teaching? In fact, on the long term, maybe UP Law Center and LB can conduct a research on the quality of law graduates taught online and law graduates taught face-to-face. Ferdy. Thank you.
Mahirap po yan, Com. What's the difference in terms of delivery? I think it's more on the personal level that, you get to talk to your students. And they're all in the same room. You get reactions, instantaneous interaction. So it's, I missed the classroom experience, actually. And probably, I think this should be studied in the long run if it's more effective. Will it be more effective in terms of critical thinking, in terms of reflection on the cases? Because I do the same thing. All the cases that we assign, these are all real stories. So I'd like to say that, tell me the story. Don't recite to me the case. Tell me what happened. You reflect on the case. I get a better interaction in a face-to-face setting.
I would also like to respond to that question, Com. I guess as a student, I'm going to compare my experience with the face-to-face now and during the pandemic and during my undergrad. I feel like during face-to-face, of course, you can really interact with your professor. You can ask the questions because in Zoom, you couldn't, sometimes you're not going to ask just so class would be over, sorry. But during face-to-face, there's a free discussion, I think, during, when you're face-to-face with your professor, and he can see, for example, your face if you don't get the topic, or he can, as mentioned earlier, he can hear your reactions to whatever he's saying. So I think there's this interaction that is the better part of face-to-face classes, but which you won't really see in Zoom. And of course, as I have mentioned, the social aspect, of course, is still one of the biggest concerns for students, I think, because during face-to-face classes, you really help each other. You can, after class, you can discuss with your classmates, or even before class, you can help each other before the teacher comes. So I think that's one of the main differences and one of the better parts of face-to-face classes. Personally, I would prefer face-to-face class over online class because I think it helps me more as a student to really absorb the material and really, of course, really interpret whatever the professor is saying better than when we had online learning. Yeah.
But just to reconcile that with what you said earlier, you do recognize that there are benefits to the online aspect.
Online learning, of course, because it's easier for both parties because they wouldn't really have to prepare to go to class or, like dressing up and going to commuting. Of course, that's the easier part. But in face-to-face classes, I think I absorb the material better than in online learning.
Yes, thank you, Com Lawrence. Yes, other questions? Ayan, it's Prof. Ben.
I really like that question. I think it's exactly the right question. What's the difference? And I thought two things. One, when we saw the two professors sing this morning, what's the difference between seeing them sing online or sing in person compared to watching a video of it? That's one. The second thing I thought about was your comment about Zoom fatigue, right? It's not, I've sat here all morning quietly, which is very strange. But I've really enjoyed and I've learned so much listening to the face. And what's the difference again? And I think that it's very much this question of us as humans, we're biological creatures and we're not digital. And that filtering of what it means to be human through digital through digital processes to go online, that we're losing that. It's not a digital, the learning experience is not a matter of data transfer. That's a digital problem. It's a knowledge creation. And knowledge is embodied in us as humans. And as you know, as we all are here together, that experience we have of being together, how we understand knowledge, create knowledge, transmit knowledge, I think that there's a very important qualitative difference. We should not be denying people who don't have that opportunity. We should not be denying them. We need to make that available online, but recognize that there's a real additional richness that facilitates deeper learning through that physical experience. There's some research on that in the cognitive psychology, but your precise question is exactly correct, and I don't know of any research. And this is what you guys are clever enough to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Ben.
I just wanted to follow on from what Ben has just said, because it struck me when we looked at this program, the title, Educating for Justice in a Digital World. I don't think we live in a digital world. We live in a real world and we use digital tools. It is not a digital world, and I think we've lost sight of that. But the comment I wanted to really hear, to mention and to hear from you is that during 2020 I was running a mentorship program for a university in Cape Town called the University of Cape Town. And what I realized is that because I was watching the news and hearing how many families were in crisis, particularly those who had jobs in the informal sector, whose income just dried up completely. There were families suddenly with zero income. And so I was talking about, leadership and personal development and change the legal system. And then I said to my students, I need you to message me if you are hungry. I need you to message me privately. We won't do this, in the group. But if right now your family doesn't have groceries, what point is there me talking to you about how to be a leader in the law when you are hungry? Unfortunately, in South Africa, there was a system where you could buy grocery vouchers. You could send someone to their phone a voucher for the grocery store. And so I started reaching out across the world to people, and the money came flooding in. And my wealthier students were asking, could they support also the students who didn't have groceries? And it turned out to be the most important contribution I could make was not, as a law teacher, but it was helping them with food. So the point that I want to make is the access to technology and the disparity and the inequality that arises because some students were in houses with lighting and electricity and laptops and chargers, and others were in shacks and they didn't have laptops. And so one of the greatest things I did was get a student a laptop, and I was just looking at the message. You reminded me now. I went back to my messages and saw she recorded a video for me and said it has changed her life. I didn't pay for that laptop, but I reached out to my network, and someone in America paid for this laptop. And so for students without telephones, without airtime, without laptops, it was very hard. So my question I'd love to hear from you, navigating the inequality, unfortunately, that arises with the technological access. And did any of your universities provide students with laptops if they didn't already have a laptop?
Probably LaSalle. Yes, if I may react to that, I actually did a survey in Ateneo, in my class in Ateneo, where which mode of learning do they prefer? 100% said face-to-face. Went to MLQU, where 80% of the students are working. Probably 60, 70, up to 80% said they prefer online. And then I noticed every SEM we have students dropping out. So I asked them, I talked to them, why? It's economic situation. They lost their job, or, the husband or the spouse, lost the job, and they're supporting each other. And the kids are now going to, school. So it's a lot of problem on the economic aspect. And enrollment is dipping down because of these reasons. So again, is the school providing for laptops? I wish. The bar exams, you now have to take it electronically, and we're supporting our bar candidates, and some of them don't have laptops. So what do? We try looking for laptops to rent, to lease these laptops. Then again, you have a problem of the specs, minimum specs, and then getting used to the laptop. So those concerns, it's happening. Thank you.
Or we improvise. Especially for my classes in MSU, I notice about a third or a fourth of my students are only on mobile phones. They don't have tablets, they don't have laptops or desktops. So if I end up using an app, a third-party app that requires a laptop, I would improvise and say, maybe you can just ask a classmate to help you find the answer. So for instance, if I have a word game where they have to find the word, right, either vertically, horizontally, or diagonally, they have to do it themselves. But if you're on a mobile phone, you cannot do that. So they'll get a classmate to help locate, and then that student on mobile phone still gets to explain that legal concept or that word that he or she found. I think, in Filipino, we have this saying, kung gusto, may paraan. Kung ayaw, maraming dahilan. If there is a will, there will always be a way, even for problems like this.
Wala na yatang lunch,
Meron naman, don't
Okay,
worry.
good morning,
Don't worry.
everyone. Good morning, ma'am. Since we are talking the inequality, inequality that does not only apply to students, but also to the schools as well, no? I am a product of Mindanao State University General Santos City campus, and we are there. We are a professor now there, together with my boss, DRP Prima Quinsayas. So our actually is this, no? We are very much willing to, of course, adopt the high flex method, no? But however, considering that, of course, our school, the Mindanao State University, especially the General Santos City campus, no, is so third world, as Ma'am Prima is being told earlier, no? So even though me as a professor, I am... of course, I during examination, I let my student to bring laptop for us to do the examination online. No, so I post the questions even in Messenger, and they'll answer in laptop and send it to me also in Messenger. However, we were bringing personal home a broadband. So each of us, each student, you should produce your own internet connectivity. Sometimes they're just using their cell phone data because our school does not provide for internet connection. So that's our problem. Although we're very willing to adopt high flex, no. Our school, even our library, the one classroom here is much wider than our library in Mindanao State University, Santo City campus. Yes, so we are a survivor in MSU Jensen. So my question is this. So does the legal community have a plan or has a plan for these kind of schools, to help us to adapt in this modern technology, especially in this using the digital way in teaching? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Com Lawrence, I think you're the man of the hour. If you could respond po.
Hello.
Yeah, we recognize the inequality among law schools. In fact, that is our dream, to help schools in the countryside, so to speak. But the challenge is, will Congress give us the money? We went to Congress, we went to the House of Representatives, we went to the Senate, and asked for around 100 million pesos to support you. I don't know if they approve it. I don't know. I understand they just went through this bicameral conference. And let's pray they will give us the money so we can help you with your problem. That is our dream.
I just want to, this is not a question, but a comment to Ma'am Amanda earlier, because I also come from Mindanao State University. Parang iba yung situation natin, no? The Jensen campus and the main campus. So I'm from the main campus. As for the laptops, the Mindanao State University, insofar as MSU, main campus, Marawi City campus, I don't know with Jensen, they provided for the laptops for the undergrad. So for the law students, only those, because a survey was made first as to those who can afford and those who cannot afford. Because some of the students are working students, so they can afford. So for those less fortunate, they were given laptops. And these laptops will be surrendered when they apply for clearance upon graduation. And insofar as conducting examinations, kasi gusto ng mga students, they wanted to try, even during the face-to-face exams, they want to try yung laptop, yung submission through digital, through online. But unfortunately, in our place, Marawi City, yung technology, the IT infrastructure, even yung smart is too poor. So what we did in my class, taxation review, what we did is we had to submit the exams through Bluetooth na lang. So yung nag-Bluetooth, from their laptop to my laptop, ganun po yung ginamit namin because I only have 20 students. So for that, in the meantime, na hindi pa namin kaya yung talagang online submission. That would be all. Just a comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just to respond to the matter of tech, part of LEAP actually, we had a research study on technology use. So, kumbaga parang we wanted to ask ourselves, what is the capacity of our law students to have technology? So, nagpa-survey among the law students. It was Attorney Gian Manjares who oversaw that study. I think he will report on it briefly at his keynote this afternoon. So, basically, we looked at the ability of the law students to adapt, what kind of gadgets they were using, how was their internet connectivity. Okay, and he'll give us the broad picture later on. But thank you for those.
Hello, I'm Attorney Fe from Leyte Colleges of Tacloban City. May I share my experiences in online learning? Actually, I have made it a practice to identify my students who are better prepared in the technology and those who are less techy. So, whenever some students would simply use their cell phones in sharing their report, their digested report to class, they would have some problems of sharing their screen. So readily, I would ask some of my more technologically competent students to pitch in, to take it upon themselves to share the screen of the student who was having difficulty simply using their cell phones. And we are able to successfully conduct our classes. Now, I have this downside on the use of online classes. Sometimes, probably this might be in relation to a difficult question that I sometimes throw at the class. You will see, no one responds. In fact, I would even say, hello, people, are you still there? Because what are posted are simply the individual profiles of students. So nobody cares. And then I give the motivation, the incentive. Oh, whoever will be able to answer my question gets a good grade. You can ask one student. I gave him a grade in recitation for 1.2. Anyone, please? Still silence. Whereas in face-to-face classes, I would look straight in the eye of every individual student, and those who can look at me straight in the eye, I would know that this student is just shy to volunteer, but I know he can answer my question. So I would pick him up. But with all profiles, I would have to say, hello, are you still there? So that's the downside of my online class. But definitely I will still go for online classes. Line, because I understand our circumstances are not the same. But there is always a way to overcome the problem on technology. We can continue training people on technology, but I don't advocate the technology replacing people. Of course, I don't want that. I would still feel hot-blooded, warm people around me who can laugh at my jokes, who can give me the bodily gestures I need to encourage me and to condole with me if I have difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Attorney Fair. Okay, so one last question and then we'll have closing statements from our panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah. I am Josephine Santiago, and I teach at the University of the Philippines.
Yes, former Director General of the Intellectual Property Office. Hi, Prof. Pin.
Thank you for saying that, because my question is directed to Dean Ferdy, who is also an expert in intellectual property. Actually, because of the use of technology, teachers are expected, or the class, even the school is expected to record our lectures and even the discussion, and that's IP. So since it's as if they're telling everyone, or they're telling us, there will be a recording. And the next expectation is to upload it anytime, so that anytime the student would want to go back to it, whether synchronously, then they can do so. Number one, as an IP professor, I feel a little uncomfortable about recordings because of the rights that pertain to one who to the one who speaks, or to the lecturer, including the students. I don't know how comfortable we would be to show really ourselves sometimes when we get mad on a face-to-face setting, when students are not able to answer or don't study. Then you can be yourself. But when you're recording the proceeding, then you might have to behave. Including the students. Would they want also to be recorded, and so that all the things, all the exchanges might be shown to the public. And then the second concern there is, of course, the recording and the fixation, and also the possibility of reproducing this. Yes. That is really something that has not been discussed in class. That intellectual property part has been overshadowed by a lot of things that are needed just to move forward technology. So maybe Dean Ferdi, is it lunchtime? Yeah, may I seek your reaction on that? Thank you.
Yeah, Dean Ferdi wants to eat already, so no. But seriously, Prof. Pin, thank you actually, because that's one of the things that LEAP needs to look into actually. And we did have previous conversations, but we haven't followed through. But we definitely are seeking guidelines on how to proceed with regard to intellectual property of what is discussed in the classroom. And so it also affects, for example, if a professor's lecture is recorded, will that mean that the university can use the recording after that and no longer have to hire the professor? There was a case in the United States where a professor who had passed away, his material was still being used as a course. So it really opens up a lot of questions. So we won't put Dean Ferdi on the spot, but perhaps usap po tayo over the break, Prof. Pin. But this is something that we would like to produce as LEAP. Some guidelines with regard to this, parang as a preliminary point for discussion moving forward, and to advise perhaps the Legal Education Board and our legal education community. Because there has to be fairness, of course, fairness to everyone. And of course, acknowledging that technology changes our behavior. Diba? Parang, I'm actually happy that even though we are being recorded and we are broadcasting live, that we can have candid conversations. Okay, but then of course, sometimes there are certain aspects that would not be good to be recorded. That's why we have in-camera sessions, or it's off the record. But thank you for bringing that up as an important point for discussion, and we look forward to more discussions on those points. And we're fully cognizant of the fact that you guys are hungry. Don't worry, we will. Our lunch break runs until 2:00. Okay, don't worry. That's why we really put 2 hours, because we know things like this would happen. We'll close this very, very engaging session, okay, with a question that was posted in the Zoom room. Okay, so we are involving our participants who are watching via live stream or via Zoom. Okay, and our closing question to our panelists is this, no? Parang, what do you propose for legal education moving forward from the point of view of a student or as a professor, as a law dean? Given what we know now, what we've gone through, and our insights from this morning's discussion.
So, as a student, I think, of course, based on our discussion, hybrid learning is here to stay. One of the recommendations that I could say is that I think legal materials like books, and based on our discussion, is not as accessible to other students. I think it should be digitalized. Which is, I think, what LEAP is doing right now. So the digitalization of legal materials, that would really help the law students to be able to access these materials easier. And, of course, the hardware part, the internet connectivity, the inequality to the devices is also one of the things that we could improve upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Okay. Prof. Prima?
I push for, this is my personal point of view, I'd push for a blended learning approach, which would combine both the synchronous and asynchronous part of learning, especially when it comes to just knowledge-based parts of the course content. Content can be accessed, let's say, on an LMS or maybe sent via email. So I don't have problems with students who live in places that are perennially under blackout or brownout. They can access these materials in their own time, study them at their own pace, and then at the same time have synchronous, which may be online or in person. Certain activities can be done online if simply a group discussion. But if it's moot court, bad idea to do it online. So it's better to do it in person. So I'd say let's enjoy the best of both worlds.
Thank you, Prof. Prima. Dean Ferdy?
Thank you. Probably I'll go back to us as human beings before becoming a lawyer. We're all humans. And perhaps we can go back to that concept of learning, the passion to learn. And technology is just, a tool to help us. So that we continue improving technology, and with that objective in mind, that we learn. We learn law in the grand manner, or how do we say it in Ateneo? I don't know. And imbibe in our students, in our faculty, that you should love learning. Thank you. LECP Level 2, please.
Thank you. Thank you. And a last word also from our research team, Attorney Renee.
Something that we've been talking about with the research team also is instructional design. Our materials were made to be read physically. And as we transition to tech, we have to reframe the information to fit the mediums that we are using. So this is another project that I think Ma'am Tanya and the rest of the research team and everyone concerned it's something that we should consider po.
Thank you. Everyone, let's give a round of applause to our panel and our resource persons. Thank you so much for such a lively first session.